Imagine a nation pushed absolutely past its breaking point. Years, really, of simmering rage just erupting into this profound and honestly pretty bloody transformation. Today, we're taking a deep dive into an extraordinary and, let's just say at times, shocking account of a country's ultimate crisis.
Exactly. And our mission here on the deep dive, as always, is to give you that shortcut to being well-informed. We sift through, often complex material, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights, and then we try to help you understand not just what happened, but maybe why it mattered and the human elements behind those big headlines.
So our focus for this deep dive is a single source. It's titled The Bloody Fall of Venezuela. And this narrative, it chronicles these really dramatic, violent events from late 2025. Events which, according to the source, sent shockwaves around the globe. And this isn't just, a story of political upheaval. It's a really stark portrayal of economic devastation, of popular uprising, and the visceral consequences when those long simmering tensions finally just explode.
Right. So, as your guides today, we'll walk you through the critical moments, the key figures mentioned, the raw intensity of a nation in turmoil. And we're drawing exclusively from the vivid details presented in this one particular account. This narrative, it really doesn't shy away from some pretty unflinching descriptions. It paints a picture that feels both deeply personal and, at the same time, globally significant.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our journey starts by setting the scene. We're in Caracas, September 2025. The source, The Bloody Fall of Venezuela, it just plunges us right into this evocative, almost cinematic atmosphere. The capital city is described as choked with dust-filled streets under the dim light of broken lamps. I mean, that suggests the city's struggling even with the basics, right? Basic infrastructure.
Oh, definitely. And the source says the nights were filled with the smell of rain and rage. That imagery alone, it just immediately conveys this profound sense of unease, doesn't it?
It really does.
And what the source illustrates so powerfully, I think, is how the environment itself seems to mirror the human condition there. It describes the sky, heavy with dark, heavy clouds thundering, almost feeling like it was in sync with the people.
Wow.
So it's not just a city on the verge. The source kind of presents it as this living entity, reflecting the huge, unspoken unrest of the people living there. The narrative makes it absolutely clear. Venezuela was on the brink of collapse, just teetering on an edge that felt almost, predestined.
And while the city is simmering with this palpable tension, the source takes us inside. Inside Miraflora's palace. This is the heart of the Maduro regime's power, or what's left of it. Right, it's rapidly eroding. And here we get this description of Nicolas Maduro. He's 62 years old, with gray hair and eyes shining with paranoia and fatigue. You can almost feel the psychological toll just from that brief description alone.
You really can. He's depicted as this man who's increasingly isolated, just clutching at the reins of power, even as they're clearly slipping through his fingers. And what's particularly striking about this portrayal of the inner circle is the contrast. You have the chaos outside and then these intense internal dynamics of power and, self-preservation inside. His wife, Celia Flores, she's 68, painted with dyed black hair and a red dress that symbolized loyalty to Hugo Chavez. But she's presented as far from just a symbolic figurehead.
Oh, really? How's that?
Well, the source actually identifies her as the mastermind behind the scenes. She's seen actively planning, her firm voice cutting through the tension. She declares, "Nicholas, the Americans are approaching. Their fleets are anchored in the Caribbean. We must prepare the militias."
Right.
So this isn't just, some vague threat. It's a very real sense of impending external danger, at least as perceived by the regime, and it's shaping their final desperate strategies.
Okay, so Celia's focused on preparing militias for an American invasion. But what about their son, Nicolas Maduro? He's 35. The source portrays him in a remarkably detached way, doesn't it? Even though he holds a seat in the National Assembly, which, let's be honest, often seen as a rubber stamp, and he's apparently amassed wealth from the oil trade.
Right. Despite all that, he's shown as distracted. He's on his phone, trying to reach out for external help. He says, "Father, I'm calling the Russians. They will save us."
That's a fascinating detail, isn't it? The contrast. His mother's talking about mobilizing local militias right outside the door, basically. And he's focused on these distant allies, hoping for salvation from afar. It speaks to a real disconnect, maybe, within the leadership itself.
It truly does. And if you think about that in the broader picture of authoritarian regimes in decline, it suggests a leadership that's increasingly isolated, not just from their own people, but maybe even from the immediate strategic needs.
Hmm.
Their hope seems to lie entirely with these external saviors, which suggests a profound lack of internal resilience, or maybe just belief in their own ability to weather the storm.
Yeah, a lack of belief in themselves, perhaps.
And the source further highlights how deep the entrenchment of family and corruption goes within this regime. It mentions Celia's nephews, the Gavidia Flores brothers. There's Walter Jacob, 40. He was Maduro's personal security, described with a harsh face and eyes always searching for danger. He kind of embodies the regime's reliance on brute force. And then there's Yaswell Andres, 38. He held a key post in the Ministry of Oil, and the source says he directly benefited from massive financial corruption.
So this network, it really underscores how deeply personal enrichment and cronyism were just woven into the fabric of governance,
Yeah.
effectively hollowing out the state from within, maybe even before those external pressures became totally unbearable.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a system rotting from the inside out.
So, okay, that's the inner sanctum. But stepping outside the palace walls, the source brings the reality for the Venezuelan people into really stark relief. It paints this grim, detailed portrait of an economy that had, quote, collapsed years ago.
Mm.
We're talking inflation reaching millions of percent. It's
Yeah.
almost impossible to even wrap your head around that number.
It is. And to try and grasp the scale, the source gives this example. A single loaf of bread was more expensive than a worker's monthly salary.
Wow. Just imagine trying to feed your family under those conditions.
Yeah, and that kind of economic devastation, it's not just a number on a chart, right? It translates directly into just profound, widespread human suffering. The source vividly describes hospitals being empty of medicine, a really stark illustration of a public health system that had just utterly crumbled. Imagine the despair, a parent unable to find basic medication for a sick child.
Unthinkable.
And daily life, according to the source, was just this brutal, relentless struggle for survival, marked by hours-long power outages, sometimes for days, apparently. And these long queues for a few liters of gasoline or a bag of rice. This wasn't just hardship, it was a total systemic breakdown of essential services, grinding daily existence into this grueling, demoralizing fight for the most basic necessities. And that level of economic collapse, that's what really turns hardship into a catalyst for, well, mass unrest.
And this dire situation, as you'd expect, it fueled intense political tensions. And crucially, a growing public defiance. The narrative points out that protests had surged following those controversial July 2024 elections, where the opposition leader, Edmundo Gonzalez, claimed he was the real winner. That specific detail, the disputed election, that feels like a crucial spark for the public's rage, doesn't it? It gave a tangible political focus to all that economic despair.
That's really critical observation. The source implicitly shows how a population, maybe long accustomed to fear, suddenly starts to lose it. Maduro's attempts to hold on to power, widespread arrests, media censorship, mobilization of paramilitaries, it only seemed to escalate the tension, not squash it.
Right, the classic authoritarian playbook. Increase repression when faced with dissent.
Exactly. But as the source illustrates, eventually that reaches a point of diminishing returns. People just aren't scared anymore. And the external pressure was also immense.
Yeah.
The U.S. had this $50 million reward for his arrest, mentioned in the source, plus warships stationed off the Caribbean coast, and constant threats of war pushing the country to the edge of the abyss. This international dimension just created this almost unbearable pressure cooker environment for the regime and for the people.
And despite all that repression, despite the military and economic threats, the source states something really profound psychologically. The people were no longer afraid.
That's a truly powerful statement, isn't it? About the human spirit when pushed too far.
It really is.
And social media, it seems, played a critical role here. The source describes viral posts, videos spreading like wildfire on platforms like X, formerly Twitter, from exiled figures like Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez. Yeah, the narrative highlights social media not just as a way to communicate, but as a kind of psychological accelerant. Imagine seeing an anonymous post, hashtag Venezuela Libre, getting millions of likes declaring, "The time of fall has come, we will be free." That shifts individual despair into something collective, into empowerment.
It's proof you're not alone.
Exactly. It's visual proof that the silent majority isn't silent anymore, that shared grievances can actually translate into unified action. So in this context, social media became this crucible for dissent, allowing voices to be heard, narratives to be shaped, collective will to be galvanized, even with censorship. It effectively shattered the regime's monopoly on information and control. And that directly contributed to that pivotal moment when the people's fear just evaporated.
So the stage is set. A nation on the brink, a regime clinging desperately to power, a populace that's lost its fear, fueled by despair, and this looming international pressure. And then, as the source dramatically puts it, everything changed on a stormy night.
Indeed. And it was on that fateful night, according to this account, that the United States launched Operation Freedom's Dawn. The stated pretense, the source notes, was combating narco-terrorism, which is a significant detail, the specific justification given for such a large-scale, pretty audacious intervention, especially considering how it ultimately played out.
Yeah, the assault on Caracas itself, as described, sounds absolutely intense, almost apocalyptic. The sky over the capital lit up by explosions. Bombs rained down on military bases, warships blockaded the coasts, special forces entering the city via helicopters. It sounds like a full-scale shock and awe kind of campaign, designed to just overwhelm any resistance with sheer force and speed.
Clearly a rapid and decisive display of military might. And Maduro's response, as detailed by the source, it was defiant, but ultimately completely futile. He gives a television speech, his voice apparently shaking, and he cries out, "This is an imperialist invasion. People resist."
He called upon those militias he'd been preparing. Celia had mentioned preparing. But the source makes it painfully clear what happened next.
What did happen? The Venezuelan army, crucially described as hungry and exhausted, it just disintegrated. And that detail is key, isn't it? It suggests the military's loyalty, their fighting will, it had already been eroded by the very economic collapse plaguing the nation, more effectively maybe than any external military pressure could achieve.
So even the military, the supposed backbone of his power, just crumbled from within, an internal implosion before a full external defeat. We hear about Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the 62-year-old defense minister. He, with his wife Yasmin Peña and their children, Vladimir Jr. and Sofia, he desperately tried to form a defensive line. But the source grimly notes, his soldiers fled one by one. It's such a tragic image, isn't it? A loyal general watching his forces just abandon him. A complete erosion of authority.
That image perfectly encapsulates the final moments of a crumbling state, yeah. What's particularly fascinating about this operation, though, as depicted in the source, is its sheer brevity. The conflict lasted just 2 weeks. The Americans captured Caracas with remarkable speed. But then comes the unexpected twist.
The withdrawal.
Exactly. Instead of an occupation, which you might expect, they retreated and delivered a message. Now let the people decide. And this raises that crucial question the source implicitly poses. What did this highly unusual withdrawal signify? What were the actual goals? It seems it wasn't about occupying territory or imposing a new government directly. It was more like strategically creating a power vacuum, clearing the way for internal forces to act.
A very specific, limited intervention then, leaving the ultimate fate and all the hard work of rebuilding squarely in the hands of the Venezuelan people themselves.
Precisely.
And that retreat, that almost provocative message, let the people decide.
Yeah.
That was what ignited the spark of the true revolution, according to the source. It's incredible to think that the foreign intervention, rather than just replacing one power with another, instead cleared the path for something totally different. This profound internal societal upheaval.
And that's where the source offers this crucial counter-narrative to typical interventions, right? By removing that immediate external threat, the U.S., maybe inadvertently, removed the one thing holding back all that long simmering internal rage. It shifted the impetus squarely onto the Venezuelan people. The narrative powerfully details how the people, who had been crushed for years under the pressure of repression, hunger, and despair, rose up with accumulated anger. This wasn't anger born from the intervention itself, the source suggests, but an anger that had been simmering, kept in check only by the regime's oppressive weight. Once that weight was lifted, the lid blew off.
And that rage became an unstoppable force. So who steps into this power vacuum? Into this incredible moment of unleashed popular fury? Juan Guaidó. The source describes him as this same young 35-year-old who previously declared himself interim president back in 2019. Now he's returned from exile. His appearance is detailed, dark hair, eyes full of determination, and a voice that echoed through the streets of Caracas. And he issues this powerful rallying cry, this promise of a new dawn. This is the end of dictatorship. Venezuela is yours, people.
You know, what's fascinating there is the power of a returning symbolic figure. Guaido, having tried before to rally the opposition, now comes back at precisely the moment when the groundwork has been laid for a true popular uprising. His message resonates because the people are primed for it, and the source clearly emphasizes the sheer breadth of this people's force that joined him. It wasn't just one group.
Who was it?
It was youths, workers, mothers, and even old men who had come out on the streets with canes. It speaks to this unifying national desire for change, really transcending age, gender, social standing.
And crucially, this wasn't an organized army in the conventional sense, was it? The source highlights their profound lack of weaponry. They had no weapons, but their hearts were full of fire. That's a critical distinction. This wasn't a military coup. It was raw, visceral, popular uprising fueled by desperation and decades of grievances.
Absolutely. And the narrative makes it clear this wasn't localized either. It wasn't just Caracas. The streets of Caracas, yes, but also Maracaibo, Valencia, Barquisimeto, they all became battlefields of the people against the regime, which signifies this widespread national movement, a complete and total rejection of the old order.
It raises a really important question about the nature of power, doesn't it? When a regime loses the fear of its people, and the people find their collective voice, their courage, maybe the traditional tools of state power, like weapons and organized military forces, become less relevant.
It seems so in this account. The sheer numbers, the unified collective will, the raw fury of a long-suffering populace. It becomes this overwhelming, ultimately unstoppable force. It transforms cities into these spontaneous arenas of defiance where human will just overcomes material advantage.
And then, the revolution, as described in the source, takes a dark, yet perhaps, given the circumstances, inevitable turn. The source shifts focus to the hunt and the fall, a truly bloody reckoning that followed the popular uprising. The first target, naturally, Nicolas Maduro and his immediate family.
Right. After Miraflores fell, he fled with his family. According to the source, to a small cabin in the heart of the forest in the mountains around Caracas, a place where, as the source describes it, the sound of crickets mingled with the howling wind. You can just picture the stark isolation of that final, desperate refuge.
Yeah, a complete contrast to the palace. It signifies the total collapse of his power. But even there, in this remote hideaway, the people, guided by Juan Guaido, found them. The description of their arrival is chilling. Armed with torches and shouts of "Justice! Justice!" This wasn't an organized arrest, was it? It was a mob seeking retribution, a direct, immediate response.
Yes, a direct response to years of perceived injustice and suffering. The source continues with really grim detail, painting this picture of a society where the rule of law had just completely collapsed, replaced by raw popular justice. When Maduro emerged from the cabin, torn clothes and a pale face, his hands up, he makes one final plea. "I fought for you. I saved Venezuela."
But the people were beyond hearing it.
Beyond reason, beyond any defense. The narrative highlights this specific figure, a middle-aged woman with eyes full of tears and rage. Her son had been killed in the 2019 protests. She runs towards him, a knife in her hand, moonlight glinting on the blade, and strikes the first blow to his chest. The source describes the horrifying moment. Blood spurted. He fell to his knees as the crowd just surged forward. Fists and kicks rained down on his body until he stopped breathing.
Wow. That individual act of vengeance from someone who suffered such personal loss, it really symbolizes the deeply personal nature of the people's rage, doesn't it?
It does. It's a direct, visceral response, a stark illustration of the complete breakdown of any formal justice system. And the brutality, as the source recounts, extended to his inner circle. Celia Flores, his wife, she tried to save him with screams, but was taken by a group of women. Her hair was pulled, stones hit her head, and her skull was crushed under the pressure.
Just brutal.
And Nicolásito, their son, scared and pleading, crying, "I am innocent." But a young man with fiery eyes shot him in the head. Blood splattered on the cabin wall, and his body fell like a doll. Walter Jacob, Celia's nephew, the security chief. He resisted with a weapon but was riddled with multiple bullets. His body shook like a doll whose strings had been cut. And Yaswell Andres, the other nephew, involved in oil corruption, he fled into the forest, but the people chased him like shadows, attacked with sticks and stones, his bones crushed, his screams lost in the darkness of the forest.
The source describes this whole scene as full of rage and blood, a moment of justice for the people, something they dreamed of for years. It really underscores that long-suppressed desire for accountability, just erupting in the most brutal way imaginable. a raw outpouring of collective fury trying to erase every trace of the old regime.
And this brutal reckoning, it didn't stop there. It spread across the nation, targeting other key figures. Diosdado Cabello, described as the powerful man of the Socialist Party, 62 years old, gray beard, voice still held pride. He was next, hiding in a luxurious house in Barquisimeto with his wife, Marlene Contreras, a former tourism minister, and their children, Daniela Cabello, a singer who the source says profited from the regime's wealth, and Jose David Cabello, who worked in the Ministry of Economy.
Again, that stark contrast. The lavish lives of those in power versus the suffering of the people. Clearly a driver of the fury.
Absolutely. The source details how local people, tired of his corruption, surrounded the house at midnight. The sound of breaking doors echoed like thunder. Another localized, popular uprising directly targeting a symbol of the regime's perceived corruption and opulence. And the retribution was swift and public. Cabello was dragged from his bed, taken to the street, rope around his neck, and hanged from a lamppost. His body swung, his face bruised, and the source states the people cheered.
Horrifying. And his family.
Marlene, his wife, tried to escape but was hit by stones. Her skull broke. She fell onto the asphalt. Daniela, the daughter, with tearful eyes, cried, "I'm just a singer." But the people retorted, "You got rich from our blood." A knife cut her throat. Blood flowed like a river. Her body trembled. And Jose David, the son, fled to the basement, dragged out. Gasoline was poured on him and set on fire. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. His screams, according to the source, became the music of the revolution.
My God. And the source says a video of this, the hanging and the aftermath, spread on X.
Yes, explicitly states it gained millions of views and shocking the world, demonstrating how these weren't isolated incidents. They were instantly broadcast, amplifying their global impact and, frankly, horror.
The narrative just keeps detailing this systematic hunt, each end more horrific than the last. Tarek El Aissami, the former vice president and accused of corruption, 50 years old.
He was in a luxurious villa in Maracaibo with his wife Rima and sons Ahmad and Karim. He apparently thought his money and guards would save him. But the people attacked at dawn, breaking down doors with fire. His guards fled.
And his end was particularly terrifying, according to the source.
Uniquely so. A stark symbol of the untamed nature of this retribution. He fought, was captured, hands and feet tied, taken to the beach, put in a boat, taken to the middle of the sea, tied to the boat, and thrown into the water. And the source chillingly adds, "Sharks, abundant off the coast of Maracaibo, tore his body to pieces. The water turned red, his screams lost in the waves."
There's something out of a horror movie.
The source actually says it was like a Hollywood movie, and that this scene also went viral on social media, cementing its symbolic power. His wife, Rima, screamed, was hit on the head with stones until she was silenced. His son, Ahmad, tried to fight, was shot in the legs, then had his neck cut. And Karim, the youngest, burned alive, his screams echoing on the beach. The sheer scale and variety of these methods, it's striking, reflects the uncontrolled, deeply personal nature of the rage.
Then there's Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the loyal general, and his family.
Yes, he was 62 in Valencia, the last stronghold of the regime, the source calls it, but his army, as we heard, had scattered. The people surrounded the military base, a final act of dismantling any organized resistance left.
Another instance of formal structures just dissolving.
Exactly. Padrino was dragged from his bunker, tied to a tank, and stoning began. The source describes his bones were crushed under the stones, his screams lost in the wind. His wife, Yasmin Peña, tried to defend him, killed with sticks. His son, Vladimir Jr., fought with a weapon, ran out of bullets, choked, and his daughter, Sofia, described as beautiful and young, she pleaded, but a woman killed her with a knife, blood spilling on the ground.
The fury extended to everyone, regardless of their direct involvement, just absolute, indiscriminate mob justice as described here.
It seems so. The source also details the end of the Rodriguez siblings. Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, 58. Her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, 59, president of the National Assembly. They were in Caracas, hiding in an underground shelter with their families. Delcy's daughters, Elena and Maria, were there, thought they were safe.
But even a hidden bunker wasn't enough.
Apparently not. The people found the tunnel. Delcy was killed by strangulation, her face turned blue, a chilling detail. Jorge, killed by a shot to the head. And their families, the source says simply, were destroyed by fire, stones, and knives. This pattern of complete annihilation, it demonstrates the totality of the revolution's immediate impact, as described. A comprehensive cleansing.
And finally, the source mentions Iris Varela and Adán Chávez.
Right. Iris Varela, 60, the Minister of Prisons, found in an old prison in Táchira a place, the source grimly points out, where she herself had tortured opponents. She was killed with the same tools. A grim, almost poetic form of retribution described there.
A brutal kind of justice, reflecting the abuses suffered.
Indeed. And Adán Chávez, Hugo Chávez's brother, 70, in Barinas, he and his family were burned alive. This final series of retributions, reaching beyond just the immediate Maduro regime to figures connected to the prior era, it underlines the comprehensive nature of the purge described in the source. It paints this picture of a nation completely cleansing itself of figures associated with decades of perceived corruption and oppression.
So after this incredibly bloody visceral reckoning, this phase of intense chaotic violence, the source states that the revolution ended, but the story continued. That suggests a pivotal transition, right? From the immediate destructive phase to something else, the daunting challenge of actually rebuilding.
That phrase, the revolution ended, but the story continued, it really is key. It signifies that the popular uprising, despite its very brutal aspects, had a clear, if maybe not fully defined, political goal to establish a new order from the ashes. And the immediate pivot, as the source describes it, was forming a new government. Juan Guaidó, now with clear people's support, forming a provisional government, which highlights that critical need to reestablish some form of legitimate authority, even after such profound societal disruption.
And the narrative then paints a picture of a surprisingly rapid economic revival, given the devastation that came before. The economy, destroyed for years, began to be rebuilt with international aid. That's a crucial detail, isn't it? It implies it wasn't just internal will driving this recovery, but significant external support, perhaps linked to that earlier U.S. intervention and withdrawal. What does the source suggest there?
Well, the source certainly suggests that international aid was absolutely vital in turning the tide, preventing the chaos from just spiraling into total collapse. It paints this picture of a nation pulling itself back from the brink, yes, with external help. And the narrative highlights very tangible improvements, things that directly address the people's most agonizing daily hardships. We hear that oil flowed again, which is incredibly significant for Venezuela's economy, obviously. Oil is the bedrock.
The key resource, yeah.
Then, hospitals were filled with medicine, directly alleviating that desperate healthcare crisis. And critically, electricity returned to homes, indicating a restoration of basic infrastructure that had been crumbling for so long. These aren't just statistics, right? These are the practical, life-changing outcomes that define the success of such a transition for ordinary people. They signify a shift from just surviving to the beginnings of actual stability.
And the global impact, the symbolism of this whole event, was also profound, according to our source. Videos of the revolution, the uprising, the fall, maybe even the rebuilding on X and Instagram went viral, shaking the world. Venezuela, incredibly, became a symbol of resistance, not just in Latin America, but globally, a testament to the power of a people pushed to their absolute limits. It's an interesting contrast, isn't it, between that localized, raw brutality we just discussed and its immediate, widespread global reach and symbolic power.
It is, and what's truly fascinating here is this dichotomy the source presents at the end. While the United Nations called for calm, presumably concerned about the violent excesses, the breakdown of order, the Venezuelan people on the ground, according to this source, built real democracy.
So a tension between external calls for order and the internal self-determined path a nation takes to redefine itself.
That's how the source seems to position it. It posits that this revolution, however violent and chaotic in its execution of justice, was ultimately seen in this account as a means to achieve genuine self-governance, a new beginning. Not just a political change, but a profound societal reset driven by the people themselves, carving out a new path that, from this account, appears to have found some success in rebuilding from the ground up.
Wow. What a powerful and, frankly, pretty harrowing deep dive this has been. We've navigated a truly pivotal, if intensely violent, moment in history, as meticulously detailed in our source, the bloody fall of Venezuela, from the absolute brink of economic and political collapse, through that unique foreign intervention, and finally, this popular uprising that reshaped the nation in the most dramatic way imaginable.
This account, it really vividly illustrates the extreme desperation that can fuel a revolution. It just lays bare the immediate, visceral nature of popular justice. When a long-suffering populace finally reaches its breaking point and the entire system completely collapses. It demonstrates how a collective rage, once it's unleashed, can just sweep away even the most entrenched powers and all those who benefited from them.
And it shows how, even in the most brutal of transitions, the promise of a new beginning can emerge from the chaos. The return of basic necessities, medicine, electricity, the oil flowing again, those are vital indicators that something fundamental shifted, moving beyond just vengeance towards actual reconstruction, a new trajectory for a nation that seemed utterly lost.
Yeah, this story, as recounted in our source, it presents this undeniable picture of public rage leading to a complete societal reset. And it really raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. In the face of absolute despair, systemic breakdown, what truly defines justice in the aftermath? And what are the enduring costs and perhaps even the unforeseen benefits of a revolution ignited by the people themselves?
We definitely encourage you to reflect on the profound complexities here. Power, popular protest, societal transformation. Maybe by exploring more broadly the historical context and aftermath of similar pivotal events. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.